Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on bringing innovation to life in your distributed team. My name is Joe Nagel. I'm the Innovation Director at the Innovation Beehive, and very shortly I'll be handing over to Zach Curtis, who is our Capability Director. Hi, Zach.
Hi, Joe.
But before I hand over to Zach, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Innovation Beehive. Zach, I can't remember, have we got any slides about us in this one?
We do.
Oh, hurrah. So yes, the Innovation Beehive. We have been an innovation consultancy doing training and training capability and leadership in innovation since 2008. We were founded at our founder's kitchen table, and that's Mark, if any of you know him. We have worked with companies all over the world, including Google, Lloyds Banking Group, McDonald's, both in the UK and globally. We're doing a leadership development program for Menzies Aviation. You can see all of our a number of our clients on the screen there. We operate in three areas. So we focus on innovation, culture, and leadership. And throughout September, we're going to be focusing in on leadership. So today, we're talking about innovation leadership and leading our teams to be more creative, to unlock their creative potential in these unsettled and uncertain times. I'm particularly thinking about working as an innovation team remotely. And Zach's going to take us through how we can do that effectively. So Zach, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. I don't know if you can hear in the background, but I think there's a horse just parading up and down outside my window, just for effect. Shh, quiet down there. So hello, everybody. Welcome. It's going to be hopefully, light-hearted and fun, but with some serious messages throughout. What messages, I hear you ask? What exactly is it we're going to cover? Well, of course, we're going to cover what actually is innovation. What does it mean? Let's call it post, but we're not post, of course, post-COVID-19. We're also going to look at what innovation means in terms of leaders and managers. And we're going to look at those behaviors that we need to role model as great managers if we're going to encourage innovation in our teams. We're also, of course, going to look at one particular methodology. Some of you will be familiar with it already, but of course, just because you're familiar with it doesn't mean you can't be refreshed or start to think about how you as a leader or manager can really help to, or even as a team member, can even help to support the rest of the team in going through that methodology. I see on the call, there's a number of people I've met before, and Joe's already mentioned some of our clients on the call. I recognize people from a range of different industries, and this is relevant for everybody. But relevant in what way? Why innovation? Why is it even important? Well, it's funny you should say that. I've been doing some research, and I started looking at, when I first joined the Innovation Beehive, I started looking at innovation generally and what it really meant. And I'm just looking across here to get some figures. So in 2013, when you put into Google, on a google.com search, innovation came up with, returned 668,000 results. I just did it this morning, and it's returned 1,640,000,000 results, and that's in 8 years difference. So quite a significant increase on the return of innovation. LinkedIn, I think it was this time last year, I did a search on LinkedIn for those people who were listed with the word innovation in their online profile. It was 4,270,988, which in itself is huge. This morning, 5,330,000 people had written the word innovation somewhere in their on the online profile on LinkedIn. Amazon, I mean, now Amazon only shows up to 100,000 results. When I first joined, it was at about 78,000. But now it's way beyond 100,000, including, of course, the Innovation Beehives book, which I haven't done up here, The Innovation Ecosystem, which is written by Mokka Kiefer. Shameless plug, but there we go. But probably we should get some sort of interaction. So just to get a feeling for the temperature of the people on the call, let's just do a quick poll. I think it's the only poll, but we will be asking you to do some chat work as we go through the webinar. This poll that's on your screen now is on the impact of COVID, and that's how you think innovation has become, whether or not you think it's become more important or less important in organizations as a result of COVID-19. More important or less important, or maybe you think it's no difference, it stayed exactly the same. Now, what's not clear is if you're writing or selecting stayed the same, is whether or not you think it's stayed unimportant or equally important as it was before, but we'll assume...
Feel free to type into the chat.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we'll wait another few seconds and then we will end it. We've got most people now who've voted. I'm going to end it now. We got most people through. Okay, I'm just going to share the results here. And hurrah, 67% said more important, 33% said stayed the same. So I'm going to assume, unless you write in the chat box otherwise, and Joe will just write a note in the chat box to show you where it is. You'll get a red number 1 coming up on the menu. He's written hello. If you've written stayed the same, I'm going to assume it's equally important. It's just as important tomorrow as it was yesterday. Okay, very good. I'm going to get rid of that. So no surprise.
It's interesting, actually. The majority of people said it's become more important, and I think, you know, from conversations that I've had with friends and clients of the Innovation Beehive over the last few months, one of the main drivers for that realization that it's more important is kind of that there's more challenges that we're facing, and, you know, there's that well-trodden quote, which I completely lost from my head. Necessity is the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. And I think, I think what we've all learned through COVID-19 is that we've had to adapt and adjust. And there's loads of webinars and videos on our YouTube page that go into that in a lot of depth, aren't there?
There is. Very good. Yeah, absolutely right, Joe. And you've very awesomely done the preamble for the next part here. So in your chat functions, we'd love to hear, following Joe's preamble there, what do you think innovation is post-COVID-19? So we know, as Joe has mentioned, that we've gone through a journey. Lots of us have had to adapt to different ways of working, different technologies, working remotely using Zoom or Miro or whatever it might be. And that in itself is also innovation, both for us individually as well as for organizations. So do type into the chat anything which you think innovation might be going forwards.
And we've had a comment come through to the previous question that, you know, we think we're more aware that it's an important part of the business, and I think that's, you know, that awareness is probably driven again through that necessity and the urgency to just get things done over the last few months. And actually the same person has commented that innovation equals business evolution. I like that. So many people, when you first talk about innovation and when they first encounter it, think of products. They think of iPhones or the nifty little Bluetooth charger that my iPhone is currently sitting on. You know, actually that's one part of innovation, but we actually focus on people-focused innovation at the Innovation Beehive. So we will apply the same process that was applied to develop the iPhone, but we'll apply it to develop an employee value proposition, or, you know, new ways of managing your talent pool. And that's innovation as well. Yeah.
We've had one more in here, which is one word: survival. I think I agree with that. Yeah, innovation definitely will help us with survival. You don't need to think about lockdown and how many, I don't know, pubs turn to takeaway to try and keep their heads above water and so on. Okay, so try and think about your own businesses and think about how innovation might, again, like Joe said, it's not just about product innovation. It could be around how you actually work with your team going forwards, especially if they're distributed or if they're working across multiple geographies more so than they were before. Because we need to think about a number of things with them, of course. It's how they work, but how they stay motivated. We also need to care somewhat for their mental health as well. And we've read all about this all through COVID. And if you followed our calls, you'll know that we have the roadmap as well to help people through that. Now, and when we think about ourselves as leaders, there's a few different things. Now, historically, we've always talked about some of the clear, obvious things which people think of when they think of innovation. You hear about Google's exciting areas to work in, huge breakout areas with inflatable unicorns and a bar and soft seating and so on, and bright colors. That physical environment is great and it's useful, but it isn't of and in itself leading to innovation. If you put in structure and processes to help innovate, like, what was the thing Google used to do? Was it 20%?
70, 20, 10. No, that's the learning thing, isn't it? Yeah, it's similar to that, though, where they, a certain percentage of your time, maybe 10% of your time, could be spent on absolutely anything that you felt could add value to the business.
In a creative way. So you could put in place structures and processes to help you do that, but you also need capability. You need people trained in how to be creative, trained in how to innovate with a clear direction in which to go. And that's what most companies are doing. But the difference that makes the difference, the real important thing from a leader's perspective, is to have yourself and your team with the right behaviors and the right mindset in order to be positively innovative moving through the next few months. And it's not just about that tangible zone, the capability, the structures and processes and physical environments, and that battleground, the difference at the top there. It's also all about, oh, hello, come back. It's also all about making sure that we as leaders can communicate innovation in the right way, essentially giving our teams permission, as well as the physical environment, the structure, the processes, the capability and behaviors and mindset, permission in the right way to become innovative. We've had a comment here in the chat just regarding evolution of learning offerings, stepping more into virtual world versus face-to-face. Yeah, we're going to cover that a little bit shortly. And just as a side note, I am a dyed-in-the-wool face-to-face trainer. No, look at Joe's face. Let me rephrase. I used to be a dyed-in-the-wool face-to-face trainer, and I hated video training. I hated any sort of online stuff. But of course, through COVID, I've had to come away from the 1990s and adapt myself into something different. And it's can be, I believe now, as effective as ever before, as long as you get the communication right, as long as you get the collaboration right, and look out for our learning trends video, which is out there on the web as well, which will tell you more about that. Okay, good. Let's hear a little bit from you, just for you personally in your own situations. Maybe you're a leader, maybe you are a team member, maybe you're a manager of people, maybe you're just interacting with others. Why might innovation be important for you specifically in your own environment? Let's just take a moment to work through that. Send a couple of words on the chat. Joe, for me, I think while people are typing, I think one thing that's important for us in our company is to make sure that we have an important employee value proposition in the business. And I think we'd need to be innovative, or it would be useful if we're all innovative to create that and make that as strong as possible.
Yeah. So that's a really good one. Yeah. And for me, innovation is, I do a lot around sort of marketing. So I need to constantly think of new things. So I'm kind of applying the creative process that we're going to talk about today on an almost daily basis, really.
We've had another one here about staff retention. To retain staff. I think that's probably true, because people, not everyone to different degrees, but people love to have some sort of freedom. We could call it freedom within a gilded cage. So freedom within the confines of the job to be creatively solve problems, or to work effectively with others, or to improve processes and so on. There's another comment here, to remain awake and present, to be of value and fulfill purpose. Ooh.
I like that, and that actually ties in with what you were just talking about, Zach, around keeping employees engaged, because when you're innovating, you do have a sense of purpose. The whole point of innovation is to solve a problem, so you're working towards a solution, and it's something that's new and an interesting solution, because you're gonna make a difference by doing it. And I think if we can kind of bake innovation into our day-to-day working and innovative thinking, we will kind of engage ourselves and our teams more strongly. Yeah.
Oh, good. So we need to become good bakers. That's the goal. Okay, very nice. I want to just take a moment so we're moving at pace, everyone, so I hope that's all right. We're trying to keep you engaged. We want to just talk about some behaviors for innovation. Now, these are behaviors that that we as leaders and managers need to role model absolutely from the top for everyone else to buy into it. If we're doing the things that we're trying to encourage our teams to do, then they're more likely to do it, of course. Now, lots of you have seen this exercise before, but take a moment to grab a pen and a piece of paper. If not, trace it with your finger on the desk or on the car dashboard or wherever you are, and answer this question. Joe's disappeared. I presume he's going to get a piece of paper and a pen. Now, I don't know how long to give us for this exercise. Is it a 2-second exercise or is it a 10-minute exercise?
Or is it a 13-second exercise?
Ooh, tricky. Maybe it's half of 13. All right, so hopefully you've written down some answers there. No need to put it into the chat because there's a good chance that you've written this. I see, Joe. You wrote 6.5. Joe, why did you write 6.5?
Do you know, I was going to write
exercise.
I was going to write another one, and then I tried to write it as a fraction, and I realized that I couldn't work out how to. So I used my 13 seconds to try and solve that problem, and it probably wasn't the best use of time.
6.5 is, of course, the answer which most people will go to most of the time because it's the most logical answer. But it's not everybody's first answer. In fact, there's a whole range of first answers that people come up with. I used to run this in face-to-face sessions for years. And these are not all of the answers. Some of the answers we came up with without prompting. And I also have people answering in Arabic numerals, in various complications of Roman numerals, in binary. So yeah, I mean, technically, they're all answering the question, what is half of 13? The challenge we have is that when we're encouraging innovation in our teams, we can't assume that they're going to come to the same solution or same answer, which we may already have in our minds. It might be something different. And we as leaders have to be open-minded enough to accept that everybody has a slightly different way of seeing a problem. Everybody has a slightly different way of working through a problem. And everyone has a different perspective. Now, you may have come across the Necker cube before. It was developed by Louis Necker in 1832. And if you look at the picture in front of you now, you'll see that it's a cube. But actually, if you look at it long enough, you can see it can be viewed from different angles. Look at Joe's face there, the concentration. So for some of you, it might be fixed looking at it from top down, which is one thing. So you could look at it from bottom up, like this. And hopefully you can see that perspective. The other way, of course, is looking at it from top down. But as that single image, it could be either, depending, you've seen lots of things like that. There's the shoes that can be different colors, apparently depending on something. And I think that was debunked, but we'll see. But essentially, different perspectives in your team is important. And also you need to be open-minded enough to accept those different views. Why? Because we are all completely different. And it's our ability as leaders to recognize the differences in our team which make innovation strong. The more we can encourage those people who perhaps aren't always the ones jumping in with solutions, because they might have great ideas with their different perspective, the more we can encourage them to have their voice and open up, the better. Hang on a second. We're not all necessarily face-to-face in an office anymore. How can we do that? How can we recognize people when we're not necessarily all in the same office before? I'm sure there are some of you where you are all back to the office, or maybe you're working shifts, or you're working in different patterns. But I know there's certainly, looking at some of the names on the call here, there's certainly some of you who actually are spending more time working at home now. How do you encourage innovation in that way? Well, the first thing is, let's think about, you know, the tangible part of that leadership pyramid we looked at earlier, giving them the right physical environment, the right structure, and the training and so on. Well, the first thing is, if we think about people working at home, we need to encourage them to be more organized. We need to encourage them to have the right things in place in order to drive forwards the methodology we're going to talk through in a minute. The first thing is time. So if we can actually encourage our teams to be more organized and effective, then there's more time for innovation. So, you know, it's great if they can plan their day the night before, or have clear boundaries with the way they work with others. And that's down to the individual and down to the way you want to manage them. But if we can engage with them in that way, that sets a good example for how we can then start to be more creative. Also putting in routines. So it could be that you want to diarize time for creativity with the rest of the team using technology, or it could be that you want to diarize habits for example, putting into place this methodology to help the team be more successful. It's also really important to set clear innovation goals to make sure that they understand what sort of solutions they should be coming up with, or what problems they should be solving, or what problems they should be thinking about. It doesn't necessarily need to be setting a clear problem-solving thing. Right, tomorrow we're going to fix this problem. It could be about them seeing the world from an innovative perspective. Having the right environment is important, and as leaders and managers particularly, we need to help people set up in the way that's right for them. Joe, as you can see behind him with his, basically it's a New York movie set, I think. He has a dedicated space for work there. You're probably used to seeing this background behind me, but this isn't where I work. I used to sit here for 12 to 14 hours a day, and I hated it. So now I move around a bit, which really works for me. And the last one is having the right tools. So of course, we become used to tools. If we can encourage our teams to use innovative tools like Miro or Teams or Zoom, then they're going to be able to collaborate much better and much more effectively together. And it's all about collaboration. But then beyond that, in terms of behaviors, it's very much about this. Now, I don't know if you've come across Rain and Sun before with us, but this is absolutely the most important behavior that you as a leader can adopt. So if you go on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter especially, you will see nothing but rain behavior. You will see nothing but people reacting to the stimulus they find on that media. They react instantly. They assume that their point of view is somehow better. They insist on a different direction, or they insist on a different solution. But actually, there's a benefit to some behavior. That's where we suspend our judgment of the stimulus that we've received. We try really to understand, seek to understand what it is that the other person is saying or sharing with us. And then we actually nurture that thing. So if we look at ideas are really important that we all grow them. We don't cut them down until we're at a point where we know that it's not going to lead to something useful. So we would grow an idea and grow an idea, suspend our judgment of what everyone else is saying, really try to understand and grow and nurture what that idea might be. So it doesn't matter if Joe and I are ideating around something and I come up with this great idea about putting a tiger on the moon, which would lead to the solution of this particular product. I mean, that's a super extreme example, but actually, Joe's job as a leader would be to grow it and say, okay, right, that sounds like a challenge. So how would that work? And what could we do? And then out of that might actually fall something more rational and usable. So really important, look at Joe nodding there. He's obviously worked with me before. So really important to use some behavior as much as possible. Otherwise you risk alienating the other person, the team that you're working with. There are a couple of other key behaviors I want to run through. And the first thing is expansive and reductive thinking. So the process for innovation, which we're going to run through in a minute, really important that we understand that that is both expansive and reductive. And as leaders and managers, we need to demonstrate that expansive and reductive thinking, even if you think you know you have the right answer. So you'll see the process. There are moments when we have to let go of our inhibitions, let go of our judgment, and be as expansive as possible in the way that we think around a particular subject. And there are moments when we'll need to narrow down the way we're thinking to come out to a particular point, like a funnel. The most important behavior, apart from rain and sun, is signaling. So that's when we can signal to our team that we are being either expansive or reductive, or I can signal to Joe that he is exhibiting rain behavior and shutting down my ideas maybe a little bit too quickly before we've explored them. So for example, Joe and I might be on a Zoom call, working on a Miro board, trying to come up with some great ideas. And I'd be being and I would signal to Joe that we're being expansive. So we're going to try and come up with as many ideas as possible. It doesn't matter if we think that it may or may not be achievable or real. Every idea at this moment is a great idea. But later, I'd signal to Joe that we're going to move into a reductive mode where we begin to narrow those ideas down, perhaps on a matrix, for example. So as leaders and managers, signaling to our team the behaviors we're expecting from them, super important. Rain and sun behavior, and expansive and reductive.
And Zach, just to really bring home that point, I think it's really important to signal before you encounter the challenge. So as Zach said, before we start whatever activity is, whatever stage we're at in the process, we need to signal the kind of behavior we're looking for, whether we're looking for expansive or reductive. It's a bit like that kind of contracting that you get at the start of a facilitated workshop, where you agree the behaviors that you're going to operate as a team, or, you know, by doing that, what you do is you give yourself and everyone in the group permission to then call out the behavior if it's not the right behavior, if it's not the right behavior for that moment. It's super important to do it at the beginning.
Thank you, Joe. But on what? On what do we innovate? I hear you chanting somehow in the background. So there's a number of different things. Firstly, you know, innovation, as Joe mentioned at the beginning, doesn't just have to be an exciting or disruptive product innovation. It could be anything. It could be actually helping our teams to be more effective and smooth in the way that we're working in a distributed or a disrupted way, through better business processes, or through improving customer experience as well. So really any problem that you're solving can be solved creatively or innovatively using the whole team for engagement. And that way you're going to come up with some great solutions as well. Okay, so we went through a methodology.
That's
I got it right.
You got it.
Yeah. So Google has their 9 notions of creativity. And number 7 is creativity loves constraint. And what that really means is you can be absolutely as creative as possible, but there is a benefit to having a methodology or a process through which to go so that that creativity can be, I'm trying to think of the right word here, can come out with the best possible outcome. Not to get too engineering and boring, but when you force air through a pipe, if there's a narrow kink in the pipe, that air will be compressed and it will come out slightly hotter and also faster. And that's kind of the goal with creativity. If we can compress it a little bit at times, it's expansive and reductive, that means then it will come out more powerful.
Yeah,
nice.
we talked earlier about how Google has that structure around giving people free time to work on whatever they want to work on. There is a caveat to that says that, you know, it must be related to the business. It's not just anything. So yeah, that creativity loves constraint kind of applies to the structure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's look at the structure. Some of you on the call, I'm sure has been in a training with me, so you've come across this structure before, but just step back and think of it as a leader, if you have, and how you can encourage this in your teams. This structure looks linear. It looks like 5 and a bit steps, but it's not. It's actually cyclic, and not even cyclic. It's multi-cyclic. So let me just try and break down what that exactly means. So there's 5 principal steps: discover, define, ideate, prototype, and test. That discover part is also sometimes called insights. And what that is all about is really uncovering the landscape around which the problem sits. The more we can uncover the landscape, the better we're going to understand what the problem and the motivations behind the problem really are. Now that stage is expansive. The more information we can get, the better. The second stage, define, is where we start to narrow down to what the problem might really be. Very often you'll find that the initial problem we're trying to solve isn't actually the real problem at all. And there's something else behind it, or a slightly different nuance on the problem which we need to solve. And by solving that defined challenge question, the problem, we're going to come up with the most powerful solution. The third stage, ideate, is all about coming up with ideas, with solutions. Now that is expansive. So the more ideas we have, the better. Very often, the challenge for us as leaders is very often with our experience, we will think, I know the answer is this. That might not be the best answer. It might be one of the best answers, but if we don't engage our teams in coming up with the right answer or the right solution. In fact, I'm suddenly reminded of one of you on this call who works for a global organization. We've put in place a mechanism to help teams engage in this way by coming up with ideas and solutions to challenges in their workplace. And it works quite well. So for those of you on the call from that particular company, very good. Thank you for continuing to encourage your teams to ideate. Now, prototype is more reductive. That's where we narrow down to one idea or a cluster of ideas that work seamlessly together to bring to life the solution that we're trying to solve. And then test is where we can obviously test the prototype with a group of stakeholders or end users, and then reiterate it, come up with more ideas to make it better and improve and improve. Now, the reason why I said it's multi-cyclic is before you move to scale in the bottom right, you may build the prototype and realize you actually haven't solved all of the problem. So you would then go back to review your discovery and your insights. If you got to the test phase, maybe you realize that part of it doesn't work, so you need to go back to ideate and so on. So it's multi-cyclic, meaning there's no harm in going back and reviewing a different stage. To give you an example, I was doing a week-long, as a participant, as part of the person coming up with ideas, I was doing a week-long ideation at Google. And we were presenting to investors on the Friday, and it got to about 3 o'clock on the Thursday, and we realized in the group that I was in that we just didn't have a good idea at all. The prototype wasn't working out, so we abandoned everything. We abandoned 3.5 days of work and went right back to the beginning and started again. And there is no harm in doing that. There's no harm in failing at innovation and encouraging, as a leader, your team to fail at innovation and to start again. I have to admit, we didn't win the investment, but we did come second in the group of people pitching for this investment. So I was kind of happy with that. We've got a question here. How can you encourage your teams to embrace a fail-fast approach? Most people get caught up in the failure, but failure is a fantastic way to learn and refine. We've done quite a lot of work with this, with different organizations, and we've actually gone through this process, the design thinking process, in order to help them solve that. And most of them have come up with things like failure parties, and basically celebrations of failure and prizes for coming up with the best possible failure. And those seem to be the most important thing. But one of the key things, of course, is, now I know the person who's asked this question, so I don't know who would be the best person in that organizer. They love a failure party, they tell me. So it's also got to be signaled from the top as well. So for leaders and managers, they've got to signal that failure is okay. I know in Amazon, they basically build failure into their innovation process. So they expect, I can't remember what the percentage is, they expect a certain percentage of failures in their own innovations, and that's signaled from the top.
Another way to signal from the top is what we call iconic actions. So that percentage failure piece is a structure, and then you can create the culture by one way of doing it is for leaders to take to do iconic actions. So a great example of that is an organization that we've done some work with. They have an award for failure. And it's a nominated piece, so people can nominate themselves for their failures, and it's all about what you can learn and the learning you can share with the rest of the organization. And the first time they launched, so that's a structure, right? Now, the first time they launched this, they had a really, really poor uptake and hardly anybody engaged with the competition. And they thought, well, what can we do? So then one of the senior leaders in the business, one of the exec, nominated himself, won the award, and then stood up in front of the whole business and talked about this failure that had happened, what he learned from it, and how actually he was a stronger person for that failure. So by showing as a leader that you're willing to own the failures that you experience, you can then role model that for the rest of the team and for the rest of the organization. That's
nice. Thank you, Joe. Okay, very good. Look, let's break down the steps in brief, one by one. And let's start with insight. That's the discovery part. So you may remember that I described earlier, that's expansive. And that's all about understanding the landscape of the challenge you're facing. Now, as leaders and managers, we really need to be able to encourage our teams to focus on 4 different areas of questioning. And that is, what is the what, the why, the who, and the how. So that could be, for example, what exactly is this challenge? What is it made up of? What is the background? What is the history? What are the facts and figures surrounding it? Why has this suddenly come up now as a problem? Why does it exist? Why do we need to fix it? And so on. Who has tried to solve it in the past? Who is involved in it right now? Who is being affected? And then the how is, how has it been? How have we tried to fix it in the past, and other how questions that you might decide to come up with linked to whatever the challenge might be. And again, that could be a business process challenge, or a customer service challenge, or a team working challenge. And the more you can answer those 4 different areas, the more you're going to understand the breadth of that, that landscape of that problem. Now, where do you get the data from? Number of different sources. It depends on the challenge you're facing. It could be industry data, market data. It could be customer NPS scores or employee NPS scores, and so on. But one of the most beneficial areas that we've actually we've been doing for years, is interviews. So the more we can interview people with a clear structure for each person that we interview, we can pull out data from them. Now, yes, it's subjective, linked to their observations and views of the challenge, but that's still really useful data from which we can pull themes. So that's what we would normally do. Now, some tips on gathering insights are, if you are interviewing a range of people, make detailed notes, and very importantly, take verbatim quotes. If you interpret what they say into your own words, it's not their data anymore, it's yours. So instead, take verbatim quotes if you can, and be structured in the questions that you ask. But also, don't be afraid to go down rabbit holes, because that's where you'll get some really deep data. Now you can see at the bottom there, interview a wide range of stakeholders. I'm sorry for the typo there. So yeah, interview as many people as you can think of that are linked to, or even not linked to, the challenge you're facing. You'll find that maybe some people that don't know the challenge have some interesting insight into the challenge that you want to solve. Probably the last thing is numbers of people. Depends on the challenge, but it could be, let's say, 8 to 12 people would be enough. Do you think, Joe?
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, interviewing is something that is incredibly easy in a virtual world. Again, it's something that until necessity led us to have to do it, it's something that we always thought would be best done face-to-face. And now we've discovered that it works just as well over Zoom or Teams, or even as a telephone call. So feel free to use digital means to interview people about the challenge. And the other thing, the other tip I would give when it comes to a wide range of stakeholders, one particularly good stakeholder group to think about is the extremes. So if your challenge is something to do with employee experience, for example, that's something that we're working on at the moment, a great extreme to think about is the newest person to the business, someone who's on day one. Sit down with them for half an hour over Teams and interview them, learn about their experience. If you're able to, it would be great to interview someone who's left the business. That's another kind of extreme. And it would also be interesting to interview someone who didn't get a job at the business, if that's possible, you know? So thinking about the extremes is really helpful, because when you go to the extremes, when you're gathering insight, you don't say, oh, well, their view is the view that I must take, because Zach's shortly going to talk about the next phase where you take a lot of different data points and combine them together. And by going to the extremes, you get these extreme data points, which can then inform the insights that you can define and move forward to idea generate on.
Well, Joe, why don't we just run through that now, and then we could probably flip over. Not that we're suddenly changing the direction of what we planned, but we could flip over to an online tool that we use.
Yeah, we'll show people the tool that we use. Exactly. Yeah, great. But talk about define first. I think that's very wise.
So, we've been expansive. We've gathered a range of data. We've got some exciting information, which we haven't judged. We haven't judged at all. We've not used RAIN behavior. Now, we need to somehow rationalize that information. We need to narrow down in a reductive way to define to something called how might we question. Now, that how might we question is basically a springboard from which we will ideate. It's possible that how might we question is exactly the same question as the original problem, but it's highly unlikely. Based on all the insights you've gathered, you're going to have pulled out themes, pulled out data, which has changed the way that you view the problem. And that's, of course, the goal of gathering insights. And then that will turn into this thing, the sentence starting with how might we, to help you springboard into ideate. Joe, it feels like I've missed something on that.
Well, I think we probably want to ask what that lady's looking for.
That's what I missed.
Yeah.
What is she looking for? Maybe type into the chat box and let us know. I know what she's looking for, Joe.
What's she looking for, Zach?
A book, clearly.
I think, yeah. Andrea said her cup of coffee. What a silly place to leave a cup of coffee.
Knowledge, thank you very much.
Yeah, knowledge, a book. And actually, we should reframe that question to what does this person need, as it says on the screen, actually, rather than what is this person looking for. So what does this person need? We've got a book, we've got knowledge, we've got a cup of coffee. We've also got a ladder, a bigger ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. We've got some interesting responses come through. So Zach, what do you think this person needs?
Well, Joe, it really depends on the data that we've pulled from the insights. So, maybe we've interviewed the books. Maybe we've interviewed this lady. Maybe we've spoken to anyone else that's in the room and so on. And we really try to understand exactly what it is that she is reaching for so that we can determine. But until we've done that, we don't really know fully, do we?
We absolutely don't. And when we've shared this image with people in workshops before, we've had some really interesting responses where they've suggested that maybe there's things outside of the shot that we aren't seeing. For example, there might be a mouse on the floor. So what she needs is to try and get away from the mouse. It might be that in her hand that's just been cropped out of view, she's holding a feather duster. So what she actually needs to do is clean the bookshelves. So we make certain assumptions by what we see. And it's always good to get more data to look broader and more broadly to then define the right challenge that we're going to go ahead and solve. Because if we concluded from this image that this person needed a book, and the book was on a high shelf, then what we would do is turn up with a bigger ladder, and the person would turn around and say, why are you giving me a bigger ladder? I'm just cleaning, and I've got an extended thing that I'm cleaning with. So until we've got all of the information that we need, we shouldn't try and solve the problem.
Yeah, quite nicely done, Joe.
Thank you.
You love that slide. Okay, so typically we would use a tool in face-to-face sessions where we would narrow down different themes taken and pulled from the data and then convert them into how might we questions. However, it's a bit more challenging to do when you're distributed, when you're trying to collaborate using online tools. So yes, of course, we use Teams, we use Zoom, we've used Cisco WebEx over the last couple of months as well. But one of the most powerful tools, and we're not in no way tied to this company, but we found it quite impactful for innovating, is called Miro. You've heard me reference it a couple of times on this call. Joe, are we in a position to share it?
Yeah, I will steal the screen share from you and I will share Miro. So bear with us all for a moment, everybody. So Zach, can we now see it on the screen?
Yep.
Excellent. So this is Miro, and I'm just going to share with you some examples of how we use it in the context of delivering an innovation project. So you can see here, we've got our what, how, who, why questions. And this was a project we ran a few weeks ago. And the broad territory of innovation that we were looking at was how we can connect with our customers in the next normal. So how we can better connect with our customers. And we asked the group that we were working with to come up with the sort of questions that you might put into an interview to talk to people about. And I'll just give a quick demo of how that might work. So Zach, give me another question. It can be a what, how, who, why. Give me an example.
Bear with. I'm just looking at the ones we've got there.
Don't worry if you're replicating. I just want to demonstrate how it works. Just throw me a question.
Oh, okay. Who do you admire online?
Nice. So you see, I have just put that there, and if Zach was logged into this Miro board, that would have updated immediately for him. It's incredibly powerful. You can have multiple people adding post-it notes at the same time. And if you've ever been in a face-to-face in-room idea generating session using post-it notes, you'll know that the idea is that if your walls aren't covered by the end of the first day, you haven't been creative and expansive enough. So this is our version of the walls in the room. But it's also useful for collating information. Actually, I'll just quickly show you this. So I'm not sure we're going to go into this on the call today, but when you're thinking about who to interview, you can think about it from the perspective of who's your core, who are your core audience, so the people who are absolutely going to be the beneficiaries of the innovation that you're working on. It could be employees, could be customers, could be managers, could be leaders, etc. And then you think who might be involved in the delivery of it or who might benefit from it in some way. So you'll think about those in the next category. And then you also want to think about outside perspectives. So people who can bring a sort of an external expertise or an external perspective to the challenge that you're facing. And you can get really creative when you're thinking and expansive when you're thinking about populating that category. And then you can, and then once you've done that, you then start to do your interviews using the questions there. But the other thing that Miro is great for is collating information. So one of the things that Zach touched upon, but we didn't go into in much depth, is as well as looking at interviews and as well as potentially focus groups and surveys, you can also just look at the world. So you can look at what's going on in the world of L&D or innovation or whatever your challenge is in, and you can collate articles, videos, podcasts, etc. And the great thing is you can collate them all in Miro. And again, you can share this as a sort of board of stimulus for people. And I'll just demonstrate that now. This video will actually play theoretically. There you go. So you can actually put videos into Miro and they'll play in an embedded way. So we'll be coming back to this. And then I'll just demonstrate, you can also just have nice, simple text boxes. So this is how we developed our how might we questions. We just had a series of how might we text boxes. And then as a group came up with how might we questions. So that takes us up to date, I think, Zach. And we'll go back to your slides and then we'll come back to Miro later.
Beautiful. Conscious of time, so we will crack on reasonably speedily. I hope you can, Joe, can you see my screen? Okay, good. All right, now good news. Helping our teams, encouraging our teams to come up with great ideas is easy. We have all been in face-to-face meetings and boardrooms. I've sat in loads and it's easy to come up with ideas. I know that because I write stuff on post-it notes and maybe another post-it note and another post-it note and another post-it note, and they get stuck up on the wall and it's very exciting. We fill it up with post-it notes. The wall gets covered and covered and covered and covered and covered and covered until basically we have so many ideas. It's amazing. Unfortunately, sometime later, maybe a couple of months later, we come back and review what we put on the wall and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We can't really remember what it meant because there were so many post-it notes just covering everything. And the biggest challenge was, of course, they weren't actually ideas. They were thoughts. There is a difference between a thought and an idea. A thought is maybe good. Maybe it's an intention. Maybe it's the kernel of an idea, but it's not something actionable, which you could, for example, give to a stranger who wasn't in that meeting and they could look at it and say, oh yeah, I get this. And that's what we really want from ideas. Now, of course, it's perfectly possible to do that face-to-face, but if we're going to encourage our teams to do it effectively, particularly remotely, we need some sort of process. So the first thing is clarity. If you're using Zoom or Teams or whatever, in doing it one idea at a time. So instead of multiple people speaking over each other where it gets complicated, firstly, you discuss the challenge area that you're facing, that how might we question at the end of define. And then out of that discussion, where you encourage your team members to talk about it, one idea, one thought actually will come out, and you take that thought and you build it and build it using sun behavior, grow that thought into an idea, build it until it becomes something with lots of detail around it. It doesn't have to be totally accurate detail. You don't need to go and research the budget you've got potentially available for that particular solution. It's just about building it out until it's got some meat on the bone, something which you would be able to hand to me knowing nothing about it, and I would look at it and say, wow, this is great. And then once you've done that, and that should take maybe 3 minutes. And once you've done that, move on to the next one, and 3 minutes, and move on to the next one, 3 minutes, move on to the next one. And if multiple ideas come up at once, park them and come back to them. Now, there is, of course, a way of doing that on Miro, which we'll look at in a minute. But firstly, just some tips. Firstly, volume. It's expansive ideation. The more ideas you can encourage your team to have, the better. Suspending your judgment, but also signaling to others to suspend their judgment of ideas and signaling that it's expansive and every idea is a good idea. And if you can do it with as many team members as possible, many minds do make ideation better. Of course, it's possible to ideate with just yourself, but encourage your team to do it with you as well. Partly they'll feel engaged, and they'll be more likely to be more solution focused generally. Build the idea and build the idea and build the idea. Actually build it beyond what you think is possible, because that means you'll push the boundaries. And it's okay to go wild, because you're going for volume of ideas. So go wild first. That'll sort of get your creative juices flowing. Joe and I did, with the team, an ideation session yesterday. It started out, I have to say, Joe, sluggish. But it was only once we started to get a bit more wild that suddenly it was like uncorking a wine bottle. And encourage ideas from the whole team. Absolutely. Joe, are we in a position to go back to Miro?
We absolutely are. I will do that now. So, yeah, Zach has talked a little bit about how you come up with ideas and how you make sure they are tangible and actionable, as opposed to just a thought, which is just something that people can't do something with. So just want to quickly demonstrate that by sharing one idea here. So you can see that this is our idea generating template, which is 3 boxes. You name the idea, you describe the idea, and you draw the idea. So feel free to draw that out on your piece of paper, and you will have our idea generating template. The description and the drawing and the naming are all very important. So you name the idea because you make it something when you name it. If you don't name it, it's kind of nebulous, but naming it lands your concept into something immediately recognizable and tangible. You then describe the idea in a way that, as Zach said, somebody can do something with. So we have here, recognize the written, design recognition cards with a nice design on the back, etc. And the idea goes on. It's very specific, it's actionable. I would know from reading just that description, roughly what you're trying to achieve and what you want me to do. There's a next step that I can see that I could do something with. And then you draw it, because some of us are visual thinkers as opposed to written thinkers. It doesn't need to be a work of art, but it's important to draw that. And that's not just for when you share the idea. Drawing it also helps you to formalize the idea. So that's an example of an idea generating sheet that's been done by someone working remotely. They've then taken a photograph of it, emailed it to the person who's doing the Miro board, or just uploaded it themselves, and then it's been added to the mix. But also, when you're working as a group together, if you came together on a Teams call, you can create your own little template in Miro. And we've just done that here. So we had this one, feedback to the future. And again, you describe the idea. So you're working as a group, you're all contributing to the idea in this case, as opposed to doing it one or individually. Again, you've got the description, which is actionable, and then a hastily drawn image on an iPad. I have no idea what that is trying to suggest by that image, but there you go. Oh, I think it's like, a scale check or something like that, not a starfish. And then, you've got these 2 ways of doing it. You can have people do them individually or in small groups and then uploading their images, or you can do them on Miro face-to-face as a group. And that's again, the flexibility and the power of using these online collaboration tools, I think is demonstrated there. Yeah, that's pretty much everything we need to cover on Miro, Zach. I think, people can see the value of it, the flexibility of it. If you want to know more about how to use Miro, just ping me an email, joe@innovationbeehive.com. Happily give you a hand getting yourself set up.
Perfect, Joe. Thank you very much. I was going to say other tool providers are available, although we haven't come across one as good yet, have we?
Yeah, and I think it is just worth reiterating. We're not in any kind of commercial partnership with Miro. We've just found that it works, and we'd love to share that with you if you're interested in trying it.
Yeah, particularly amongst distributed teams. Okay, good. So when it comes to prototyping, it might be then you want to empower a smaller group of the team in order to prototype rather than everybody. However, everybody can still have input. The first thing is to try and agree with your team what might be the best method to prototype a solution. And you should prototype a solution regardless of how big or small it is. Again, not just product innovation, but even a change to the working practices of the team could be prototyped and tested. And that could be anything depending on what it is you want to bring out, what sort of solution you want to add value to. It could be video. In fact, video is huge at the moment. It's really, really powerful and so easy to edit video these days. Cardboard modeling, storyboarding is also a good one because you can see then the customer or end user journey using the solution in some way. Lego prototyping is still very prevalent as well. Role playing less so, and that usually comes up in pitching. CAD modeling, should you happen to have a CAD designer as part of your team. and just general diagrams, which could also then form part of the storyboard. Business model canvas can be used in, if you know that, Alex Osterwalder, could be used in a positive way, should you want to. And then just building things out into a bigger idea, a concept to then sell into whoever you need to sell it into. There are various types of presentation software where you can use 3D human models and move them around using presentation software. I think Storyboarder is one of them, or various animations. So there's a whole range, and it really depends on the solution that you're trying to solve and who you need to sell it into and so on and so forth. Yes.
I think there's one more that's probably worth mentioning in the context of working remotely, and that is building a website. So one of the projects we're working on at the moment is it's a new way of navigating to products and services provided by a company. And we're actually building the prototype, and again, working as a distributed team. People have been able to contribute to that as we've gone along. And it also makes it a lot easier to get feedback on it when it's in a website form. So the key message, I think, with prototyping is use the prototyping methodology that best lends itself to the idea. So one prototype might be a website. Another prototype to solve the same challenge might be a CAD model. You know, it depends what the challenge is, what the ideas are. Be flexible, be creative in the prototyping as well as in the ideation.
Thank you. There are two key areas that we as leaders and managers need to focus on encouraging in our teams, regardless of how many of them are taking something forward to prototype. The first thing is we need to build out the idea even wider, even more broadly, into something which we'll call a concept. And that's where it's even more actionable, but not quite yet a prototype. We also, as Joe showed on Miro, build our stakeholder map, all the people that might need to be involved in the building of the prototype and the testing of the prototype. And Joe showed that with the concentric circles on Miro. And then building the prototype itself. Who in your team might be the best person to do that? How much time are we going to give them, or budget, and how? But then trying to encourage the team that we need to have a call to action at the end of it. Not just a pretty prototype for us to show to somebody, but how can we get a next step planned in? Now that comes from a couple of key areas. It's basically, as we saw earlier, the what, the how, the who, and the why. So how can we encourage our teams to be able to articulate a whole range of facts, you know, the landscape from the insights, the facts and figures of surrounding the challenge in some way, how we're going to measure return on investment. In terms of how, bottom left there, what might be the plan that we can encourage our teams to build to move from prototype to test and then to scale, or perhaps to reiterate before we launch, with lots and lots of detail. So who might be the best dressed person? It's not going to be me in our team, for example, because my detail focus, my detail focus is less. So who might be the best person? With the who, bottom right, how are you going to engage, or how is you're going to encourage your team to engage all the stakeholders involved in or touched by the solution? And top right there, the solution itself. How are you going to really get that solution to demonstrate that it adds value to solving the problem?
And I think on that point, Zach, this call to action is so important when it comes to innovation projects, because sometimes there's an analogy I use. It's the on the bus analogy, right? So when you're working in a project team, you feel like you've achieved so much at the point that you've done the prototyping, but you've done nothing at the point that you've done the prototyping. You haven't actually added value at that point. You only add value when the idea that's been tested, the ideas that have been tested and not succeeded have been learned from and iterated and improved. And you've got an idea that you're ready to take to the business and say, this is what we're going to go ahead and do. And you've actually done it. Only at that point is value derived from innovation. Otherwise, everything you've done has just been having a nice time together as a team and hasn't actually delivered results. So this call to action piece is so important. And in some ways, it's more important than ever when we're working as distributed teams, because you need to be thinking about how you're going to bring stakeholders with you who weren't part of the innovation team. And that bottom right quadrant there, how will you engage all stakeholders involved or touched by the solution? That is probably the biggest quadrant and the most important quadrant to consider. And thinking back to the prototype slide where Zach had all of the different ways of prototyping, I think really good to think, how can I share this idea in a way that engages people in a remote context?
Thank you, Joe. So I know what you're all thinking now. You're all thinking, yes, nice words, lovely, thanks. But what next? Well, all we're asking you to consider is when you think of your team, or when you think of the company you work in, what is the biggest gap currently? and what might you be able to do to address it. It's all built up in small steps. You can't change everything immediately. So, maybe it's actually just putting the right tools in place, or maybe it's having the methodology, a clear understanding of the methodology, or something more soft, getting the right culture embedded in the company. Now, of course, Joe's on hand. I'm going to volunteer Joe. Joe's on hand to chat about that stuff anytime you like. But in the meantime, maybe you want more information on the process itself, on design thinking. If only there was a way where I could watch a whole load of videos and download some, I think 13 PDF tools to help me innovate and ideate with my team. If only we had that. Oh wait, we do. All you need to do is open up your camera, show it at that QR code, and we'll give you 50% off. So that takes it from £99 down to £49.50. What price to get innovation in the team, Joe? What price is that? Nothing.
You know what? I've just, given that we've been talking so much about Miro on the webinar today, anyone who wants to do that online course, happily I'll give you half an hour of my time to talk you through how you can take those tools and templates, put them onto Miro, and really, work collaboratively with your distributed team. So if you register, and I'll find out you've registered. So I'll then get in touch to arrange a time for us to chat.
Blimey, Joe, I've never heard you do that before. That's quite valuable. I'm
a very generous soul.
You need to teach me. All right, Joe, I think that's it if we want to wrap up.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights into design thinking and how we can work together in a distributed context. It was fascinating, and thanks to everyone for contributing in the chat box. I hope you took some value from the webinar today. Whoa, thanks. And that was a video that was supposed to play as Zach talked through the course, but there you go. So please do, feel free to get in touch. I'll send a recording of this later in case any of you dropped off. Look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Throughout September, we're going to be focusing on various aspects of leadership and teams. So do check out our future webinars. They're every Thursday, either at 11 a.m. or at 2 p.m., depending on diaries, etc. But thanks again, Zach, and thanks to everyone. Have a great day. Take care.
Have a great weekend when it comes.